Welcome to WiseTake.com. This is CK013. You can find me on Twitter at CK_013. And yes, we are bringing you another NBA DFS podcast. It is Monday, March 27th, 2017. And it looks like we are back down to a 6-game slate. Before we talk about tonight's slate, shout out to Fuego Steve. Definitely going down and doing pretty good for himself over in the live final. He didn't take home first, but it was his first live final ever. And considering the fact that he finished above half of the field, I mean, you got to give him props. I mean, he's going against some of the best players in the world. So hats off, Fuego. Had a lot of fun talking to you up until the event. We appreciate your time on the pod, and hopefully we'll have you back, of course, once you get back around. We'd love to get a chance to talk to you about it. But listen, man, when you're in a live final, one of the things me and Fuego were talking about was, when you're at a live final, some guys that may be more contrarian on like a large slate, a large main slate tournament out of like 100,000 people, they're going to be more chalky. The reason is you're playing with sharper players. So you're playing with educated guys who, there's a reason they're down there, most of them. Now, yeah, one or two maybe guys got lucky and that's why they're down there. But most of these guys have an idea what they're doing. They're pretty good. And it's just really, you have to really think the game theory in general changes, because you're going from, maybe like a casual stakes or a low stakes player. That's a high stakes game. So maybe you don't see those tournaments with like 660 or $666 buy-ins out of like 1,000 people. Those are sharper players typically. Now, sure, there's some fish with a lot of money who will play those tournaments too, but a lot of the time, the competition itself, like some of the guys that might be good plays, but not necessarily crazy high owned in a large field, they're going to be higher owned. And maybe guys that are bad chalk, they're not going to be as highly owned because these guys are a little sharper. So it definitely is interesting, and the whole game theory, everything changes. There are lineup construction, everything's got to be different. And yeah, so I'm sure I hope he had an awesome experience. From what I talked to him, sounds like he had a blast, which is awesome. So congrats, Fuego. Anyway, just moving on, just talking about the slate in general. Westbrook dominated. He wasn't on the DraftKings main slate, but he was on the FanDuel main slate. He dominated. His team got dominated, it seemed like, but Westbrook played the minutes and he got it in there. Something I always like to say, Lou Williams went off. Whenever I say, if for any reason you're not going to play Harden in a situation, a lot of times that would mean Lou Williams should be in play. Just because, we know now that ever since Lou Williams got there, Harden's, I don't want to necessarily say usage, but they're not as reliant on Harden to do everything. So now they got guys like, they got Eric Gordon. They got Lou Williams was a great addition of guys that could score. So if you're not going to play Harden, I feel like if you're not going to play Harden, maybe you should play Lou Williams or an Eric Gordon, somebody who may get more run if the game's not close, or somebody who they're not necessarily concerned about covering. So we know whenever Harden plays Oklahoma City, they're going to stick Roberson on him, their best defender. So any team, like a Tony Allen, for instance, we know today Tony Allen's going to be guarding either Clay or Curry. So it's you got to pay attention to who. A lot of these teams, they have elite defenders. Like maybe the whole team's not great at defending, but they have one specific guy who they use to defend wings, and that guy's going to get more run if they're playing a guy where they need him. And this was a situation, I think, that Roberson was going to be on Lou, so that meant that they weren't going to really have a solid, good defender on the wings to cover a Lou Williams and Eric Gordon, etc. So Trevor Ariza went nuts. I thought that was pretty cool. A lot of people always like to play him when when Ryan Anderson is out, because they feel Ariza's more comfortable at the 4. It certainly appeared that way. He looked good. They got 50 DraftKings points, over 40 FanDuel points. That's pretty awesome for his price, and I know he made Fuego's roster, so we're happy about that. But yeah, it was an interesting slate. The FanDuel live final seemed like it was a great event, and definitely something that I think all you guys who play FanDuel should definitely strive for, and I'm sure Fuego can elaborate on that more when we have him on the pod later, but or later in the week. But anyway, we got some basketball to talk. It's back to real life. It's back to the wrapping up this NBA season. Season's almost over. Season ends April 12th, and baseball starts in about a week. So I know I'm pumped. I can't wait for some baseball action. I've been waiting for baseball DFS. We got somebody coming on the team. I'm happy to announce. I won't give out his name until you guys get a chance to meet him. We're going to have a podcast sometime this week, kind of like a preview to the MLB season with him. He was a very successful DFS baseball player, MLB DFS. He was very successful over the last couple seasons, so we're excited to have him on. Smart guy, intelligent guy, knows what he's doing. So we got a lot of stuff to look forward to. As basketball season winds down, we got a whole new beginning for WiseTake going into our first MLB season. So we're excited about that for sure. And yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Anyway, let's move on to tonight's slate. We got, the injury news doesn't look as bad, but I think that's because we've been having all these like 8, 9, 10 game slates. So we've been having like full sheets of injuries. But if you think about the fact there's only 6 games, the injury list isn't so small. So we got Carmelo Anthony, who's questionable with a knee against Detroit. Lance Thomas questionable with a hip against Detroit. Jeff Green is out with a back at Toronto. DeMarre Carroll is questionable with a back against Orlando. Iman Shumpert questionable with a knee at San Antonio. Marc Gasol is expected to be out with a sprained foot. We know he missed Sunday night's game against Golden State. And Memphis loves to play Golden State. So if he couldn't go, he's got to be hurt because Memphis has played Golden State very tough all season. So I'm sure that if he could have gone, this would have been a matchup he wanted to be a part of. So we'll have to pay closer attention, but I would expect him to be out at Sacramento. Ty Lawson is questionable with the knee against Memphis. Boogie, we know Boogie didn't play on Sunday night. He's questionable with an ankle against Utah. Favors is out with a knee against New Orleans. Gordon Hayward's actually questionable with sore quads against New Orleans, and Shelvin Mack is questionable with his ankle against New Orleans also. So one thing going back to Sunday night slate, there wasn't a lot of clear value in the later games, maybe on the FanDuel main slate, but even so, a lot of the important value was kind of announced after the fact. So we find ourselves in a situation again where the value looks a little bleak. Now, I'm hoping if they rule out Carmelo, we can go back to some of the Knicks value because I've been kind of riding that whenever the Knicks have been playing. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. We'll have to go position by position as we always do and kind of take a look. But as of right now, there's no immediate value that stands out. So it's going to be interesting on a slate where there's Westbrook, of course, and you typically need to find value to play him. It's going to be very interesting, but we're gonna go over and talk about some of these things. So starting off with point guard, we got Russell Westbrook, of course. He's 12-5, coming off a massive performance. In 2 games against Dallas this season, Westbrook is averaging 57 DraftKings points. It's not necessarily his, we know what Westbrook is. He's a guy that lives off peripherals. He's a triple-double machine. So the one thing I like about Westbrook, again, and the reason he's so successful is because we're not so reliant on his scoring, right? Like, yeah, okay, he's going to score, obviously, but if he doesn't, he's still going to get you rebounds. He's still going to get you assists. He's got a great matchup against Dallas, and the spread is pretty close. So I would imagine Vegas seems to think, or their numbers, or their algorithm, or whatever they use, seems to think that it's going to be somewhat of a close game. So anytime there's a close game and Westbrook's involved, you don't want to overpass on Westbrook for sure. So it might be tough. I don't really see too much value right off the top. It might be tough to fit him in unless value opens up, which always seems to happen. So we're going to want to pay attention as always. I don't see a way around Westbrook, even though we got some interesting games. So the Westbrook at 12-5, definitely he's every night he's on the slate. He's going to be the highest projected player. And he's coming off of a monster game. Now keep in mind, Westbrook against the Rockets, he was coming off of 4 days rest, or at least I think 3+. But and on top of that, the 2 games he played before he had those 3 or 4 days off, he didn't play more than 30 minutes in 2 straight games. So he was rested, and I would imagine he's still rested. I know it's a back end of a back-to-back, and he played good minutes and he played hard, but it's Dallas. I'm not too concerned, even though it is a pace-down spot. We got to consider that. It's definitely a pace-down spot. But what it comes down to, what I find with Westbrook, is you have to look at the rest of the point guards. Is there anybody else, or not even the rest of the point guards, the rest of the slate in general, is there anybody else that can come close to this guy's price? Because if there's not, you can't fade him. So we'll have to take a look. Kyrie Irving is 7,900 against San Antonio. Love the price, but we know Kevin Love is back, and they've been kind of easing up his minutes a little bit, like raising them. So the usage of LeBron and Kyrie are typically going to drop a little bit. Still, we saw what Derrick Rose did against San Antonio the other day. He had a great game against San Antonio. San Antonio hasn't looked so sharp defensively lately, so I think Kyrie is definitely in play at 7,900. But it's amazing the drop-off on tonight's slate. You go from 12-5 with Westbrook all the way down to 79 with Kyrie on DraftKings. So it's a pretty dramatic drop. But I definitely think Kyrie's interesting at 79. Mike Conley at 75 is the back end of a back-to-back, so we're going to be easy. And he's playing Sacramento. Sacramento, even though they don't really have anybody, they've been surprising people and keeping games somewhat close. So they're not necessarily a team that I'm dying to fade. Now, keep in mind that the Spurs did have some time. The Grizzlies did have some time off. The last time they played before Sunday night against Golden State, the last time they played was March 23rd. So they did have a couple days off. So they're somewhat rested. So even though it's a back end of a back-to-back, I would still imagine they should be able to go. And they're playing a team that is pretty bad defensively overall. So I think Memphis is going to be interesting to target here. Two slower-paced teams again, but it's a smaller slate. So we're going to have to, you want to, as me and Fuego talked about on a couple pods ago about these short slates, you kind of got to go with raw projection at this point. Elf on the Shelf, 7,100 against Toronto. It's a big spread. I was a little surprised. Just because Toronto hasn't looked all that impressive to me lately. I know, I guess when they have to play, they will. But this is a situation where they're playing Orlando, a team that's pretty much out of contention. I like Elf. Point guards against Toronto lately has been a thing. Corey Joseph started off when he first kind of took over as a starter. His defense looked okay. He looked decent. But lately, it hasn't looked so great. And point guards have been putting up pretty good numbers against Toronto over the last week or so. So I think at 7,100, Elf is very interesting. And the same thing I said about Westbrook. I'm not comparing Elf to Westbrook. But the reason I like Elf is because obviously he's a triple-double threat, which means he gets peripherals. He's not a guy, if you look over his last few games, 14 points, 15 points, 10 points, 10 points as far as actual points. But then you look at 10 assists, 5 assists, 4 assists, 11 assists, 11 rebounds, 5 rebounds, 13 rebounds. So he's a guy that's not necessarily so scoring dependent. Now, yeah, you like him to score because his rebounds and assists aren't as consistent as that of a Russell Westbrook, and that's why he is not Russell Westbrook. But the guy tries, and he tries to get rebounds, and he hustles. So I definitely think Elf is in play at 71. I actually like Elf when you're thinking about guys with the price. Drew Holiday, 6,700. Not crazy about the matchup against Utah. It's not necessarily the matchup one-on-one. It's just the teams in general. These are the two of the slower-paced teams. I mean, New Orleans all season was pretty fast-paced, and without Boogie, I think they go back to that faster pace, so it's interesting for sure. But it's the back end of a back-to-back. I think you can still play Holiday. He's shooting guard eligible on DraftKings, so that's an option. So you can certainly go there when you consider the fact it's a pace-down spot. And I would only really look to Holiday if I knew Boogie was out for sure. I would imagine he's going to be out. I don't see why he wouldn't have played tonight if he wasn't healthy enough to play. Not that they needed him. They completely blew the doors off of Denver, so obviously they didn't really need him. But, yeah, I don't like to play Holiday unless I know either AD and or Boogie are out. And preferably I want AD in there because he's a lot more comfortable and used to playing with Anthony Davis than he is with Cousins, obviously. So if Cousins is out, I think Holiday's in play. Keep in mind he's shooting guard eligible, so if you want to play him there, I think there's an advantage to having a point guard at the shooting guard spot. You're getting basically an extra point guard in your lineup. George Hill at 5,900. Don't think I'm too crazy about going against Holiday. I respect Holiday's defense, and even though Hill's minutes have been there, especially with Sheldon Mack out, we've seen George Hill play solid minutes. I'm just not crazy about it. Now, one thing to consider: Gordon Hayward's questionable. I haven't ran the usage tools yet, but if Gordon Hayward is out, we might have to check and see what that does to George Hill's usage because we know Gordon Hayward would be out, and then we know Favors is already out. So that would pretty much leave the main two dominant starters of Gobert and Hill. So if we find out that, if you do the numbers and it says that Hill's usage goes up dramatically, then we're going to have to consider Hill at least in tournaments at 5,900. But if Hayward plays, I don't see a reason to go with Hill in a tough matchup with Holiday. And overall, New Orleans has played decent defense, believe it or not. Derrick Rose is 5,800. He's against Detroit. It looks like he's one of the starters that they plan on playing. Maybe they want to give Rose an opportunity to show he's going to hit the free agency market. Maybe they're giving him an opportunity to kind of show what he could do before he hits that market. And at the same time, for the Knicks, they're paying for him. They had him on the team. Why not use him, right? Why not sell some tickets and use him? So Derrick Rose, he's been playing big minutes. We know his backups ever since they got rid of Jennings. Rose has been taking on an influx of minutes, and he's got a matchup with Detroit. I'm not too afraid of it. Now Detroit is a slower-paced team. He's going to see a combination of Ish Smith and Reggie Jackson. I don't think they would put KCP on him. I guess not unless he was really destroying. But I would imagine he has a decent matchup. Am I crazy about Rose? Not necessarily. In cash games, I think he's okay. My problem with Rose is his ceiling, right? Like, what's his ceiling really? How often have we seen him? A couple times we've seen him hit 40, and if he was to do that, that'd be great. But it's been a long time since we've seen him actually hit 40. And against San Antonio, he was 10 for 22. He took a lot of shots. So if Carmelo is out, I think we can kind of look to Rose again, especially in cash. But if Carmelo's playing, even if Carmelo's playing limited minutes, I just don't think I want to go there. But like I said, just pay attention to injury news. It's going to be important. Seth Curry against Oklahoma City. We've seen Seth kind of, he's getting minutes. And from what I understand, he's supposed to be running the offense at the point. He was extremely disappointing against Toronto. I thought that would have been a nice matchup for him. He shot 4 for 10 from the field, 2 of 6 from the 3. only got 2 assists and 1 rebound. So it was not a very good game. It was, 18.25 DraftKings points. Not exactly impressive by any stretch. But still, you got to have short-term memory. As I always say, Oklahoma City is not a very good defensive team overall. And I don't see them wasting Roberson on Seth Curry. I think they'd rather put him on a guy like Barnes or Wesley Matthews or someone like that. So I think Seth Curry is certainly interesting at 5,300. He gets a pace-up spot. He's at home. And, his brother always plays well against his team. They're kind of rivals. So, he's going to want to represent his brother, I guess. So at 5,300, I think he's okay. The price is pretty cheap, and we know what his upside could be. I'm not really big on Ish or Reggie. I know their prices are cheaper, but the minutes are just too inconsistent for both of these guys. Reggie seems like he's playing with literally no confidence. And not to mention, the Knicks have actually been pretty good against point guards all season, so I'm not dying to go there. If you want to go there, I see merit, but I'm not dying to. Corey Joseph, 4,800 is also interesting just because his minutes are up there. Again, it's another guy where he doesn't have necessarily a ceiling that you might be looking for in tournaments. But at 4,800, if you need a punt option for anywhere, cover utility or whatever the case may be, I get it. Especially on a slate where as of now you may have to force some value. For instance, if it's Corey Joseph or Reggie Jackson, who are both 48 on DraftKings, I'm taking Corey Joseph every time. Number one, he's home. Number two, he gets the minutes. That's the bottom line. Darren Collison is very interesting. Lawson is questionable, so if Lawson can't go again, then I wouldn't mind throwing Collison out there at 4,700. Now, Collison's minutes have been a little suspect. Even in games without Lawson, I think they've still been a little weird, which is why he's so cheap. So, but we know what his upside could be. If for any reason they give him over 30 minutes, we know what his upside is. We saw him put up 48 DraftKings points against Orlando the other day. So if Lawson is out, and only if Lawson is out, will I consider Darren Collison. But I certainly will consider him for sure. That's pretty much it for point guard for me. I'm going to move on to shooting guard. DeMar DeRozan, 8,600. We know he's got the usage bump. His price is back up to where probably I think everybody kind of expected it to be. And it has been for a couple games. It was nice having him at 77, but those days are long gone, and he's back up to, we've seen him at 87 2 games in a row, and now he's 86. He's against Orlando, and the line is big, so apparently Vegas seems to think this game should get ugly. I personally don't know about that, so I wouldn't I wouldn't stay away from either of these games for that purpose. I can understand staying away from the game because you don't like the pace. I get that. You don't like the total, whatever the case is. But I think it's okay. Even the line necessarily, I'm not going to let that control what I think. I think DeRozan's in play. His usage is up there. I don't think he'll be too popular because I think a lot of people are going to try to jam in Westbrook, especially after seeing him put up 75 today. But at 8,600 on DraftKings, I think DeRozan is in play. I would honestly, there's another guy in this game that I like more from that side. There's a couple guys I like from that side more than DeRozan. He's probably third out of the top 3 guys that I would want to play on Toronto's team. DeRozan's honestly probably my third option. We talked about Drew. Oladipo against Dallas is okay, 6K. Averaging 30 DraftKings points. They only played once. He got 30 DraftKings points in that game, so I think he's okay. Buddy Hield, we know they're trying to force him down everybody's throat, and we saw his upside could be. 33 minutes against Golden State the other day, put up 47 DraftKings points. So he didn't do as well for Fuego. I know Fuego played him yesterday. He didn't do as well for him as we would have hoped. But he's 5,700. His price is up there because he's going to chuck, and we like guys that are going to keep chucking. My issue here is the reason he's been playing well is because he's been shooting well. He's been shooting over his last 3 games, 57% from the field, 50 and 50. He's not taking 20-something shots like a Dion Waiters or a DeMar DeRozan or one of those guys that are really chuck. He's not, or Lou Williams even. He's not taking shots in the 20s or whatever the case is. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to hate. 14 to 16 is still a lot of shots. And he's been getting some peripherals. Against Golden State, he had 8 rebounds, 2 steals. He had 7 assists. And, I'm looking at his game logs now. I don't really see too many games lately where he hasn't gotten rebounds and assists. So it seems like he's a little bit more active. Now, it's a pace-down spot. They're already somewhat of a pace-down team. But I do like to attack point guards against Memphis. Guards in general against Memphis. The only thing that'll hold me back is Tony Allen. Now, I don't know if Tony Allen's going to play. We've seen in a lot of situations this year where Memphis has rested him on the back end of a back-to-back, and he's constantly hurt, not hurt, hurt, not hurt. So I wouldn't be surprised. He just came back from injury. I wouldn't be surprised if they rested him here. If they rest them here, I think that you can kind of play some of these Kings wings if you can figure out how the minutes are going to work. The biggest problems with the Kings is we don't find that information. We don't know. And they're 10:30 at night, and we're not going to know. We're not going to know. Is Tyreke Evans going to play? Is he not going to play? is Lawson going to be rested randomly for no reason? Is Collison healthy enough to play? We're not going to know. That's the bottom line. So I think a guy like Buddy Hield, as long as he's healthy, he's probably one of the safest options you can go with because you know they're going to give him a run because they want to see what he can do. They think this is the second coming of Steph Curry. So even though he's expensive, it's kind of similar to the situation in Phoenix where we don't really like those players per se, but you kind of have to play them because they're going to get minutes, and that's what we're looking for in the NBA, especially this time of year when minutes are very iffy. Fournier, 5,300. I think he's interesting against DeRozan. I really do. I don't think he'll be too popular. He's in 2 games against Toronto this season. He's averaging 31.9 DraftKings points, and DeRozan's defense has certainly slipped. He seems like he's might have lost a step. Maybe he's a little tired at this point in the season. But I do like Fournier at 5,300, and I think people will stay away because they'll see that red 5th for under opponent ranking over at DraftKings. KCP, 5,200. Now, honestly, this is a spot like they played the Knicks 3 times this season. He's averaging 29 DraftKings points, and I don't get it. I mean, this is if there was ever a spot that I thought he would have crushed, or a team that I thought he would dominate, I thought it would be the Knicks. The Knicks have struggled against shooting guards all season, and yet KCP hasn't really broken out against them at all this year. So at 5,200, he's certainly in play, but I would only put him in GPPs, especially with the floor he's been showing lately. He's been really struggling lately, but I mean, on paper, it seems like a good matchup against the Knicks, but I guess, it's definitely not a lock by any means. Wesley Matthews, 5,100 in play. His minutes have been up, and in cash games, I think he's okay. He got, 21 DraftKings points in 32 minutes against him last time, so he's not really a guy with, he has a ceiling. We've seen him put up ceiling, but we need a bunch of injuries, and we need a reason that he's going to take more shots. Maybe like Barnes is out, or Barnes and Dirk are out, then you can expect Wesley Matthews to take shots. But otherwise, while he might be safer than some plays, he's not exactly I'm not dying to go there, you know what I mean? Tyreek Evans, 4,500. Don't mind the price, but the minutes are suspect, and we never really know if he's actually going to play. It's the back end of a back-to-back. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't play. Garrett Temple, I think Malachi Richardson is out for the season, so Temple should be seeing decent runs. So if you're trying to force value somewhere, and maybe you don't want to play a guy like Buddy Hield, or you're not sure if you're not sure if we find out maybe Lawson's not playing or something like that, I think Temple's interesting, and he could be a guy that we could look at as value. Now against Golden State, he only got 16 minutes and only 17 DraftKings points, but his 3 games prior to that, he got in 28, 26, and 24 minutes, and he put up over 22 DraftKings points in all 3 games. So I think if we find out Tyreek is out for any reason that we find out early, which I don't think so, because the beat writers for Sacramento have been, let's just say, subpar this season. If for any reason we found out Evans was out, I think we could certainly look at Garrett Temple to get more minutes, and I think he would be a solid value play. Joe Ingles is somebody I'm only going to – I only play him when Hood is out, and if Hayward is out, I'm going to have to consider him because I'm not exactly who they're going to put at the backup 3. I would imagine it has to be Jingles. I'm not positive on that, but Joe Ingles. I call him Jingles, I'm aware that his name is not Jingles, but yeah, I mean, there's not too many. Joe Johnson. There you go. Joe Johnson is probably going to play, but they've been playing Joe Johnson anyway with Favors out. So I think 4,100. That's the value at Utah. If Hayward is out, it's going to open up some value. I think you could still play Jingles. He might still come off the bench. That's fine. I'll still take him because they're going to rely on him to shoot more. Gordon Hayward is a big part of their offense. Takes a lot of shots. One of their best scorers on the team. So I think the players around him, their usage is going to go up. And anytime there's an injury, we kind of look for these situations for value. So I think there is some to be had between Joe Ingles and Joe Johnson. It's not the most attractive plays, especially not against New Orleans, who's been playing pretty good defense. But sometimes you got to find those guys when if you want to afford these guys. Sometimes you got to make ugly plays. It's sad, but it's true. But yeah, so I'm not crazy about them particularly. I mean, Rodney Hood at 3,900 is very interesting, but even his minutes have been suspect. 21 against New York, 23 against the Clippers. Before that, you don't even want to know. They've been taking it really easy on them. So, we're going to want to be careful there. And we might not even know about the Utah value. We might not hear about the news in time. There's a good chance it's at 10:30 at night, and they're playing Sacramento. They're playing New Orleans at 10:30 at night. So we may not know. Moving on to small forward, LeBron James, 10-3. Phenomenal spot against Kawhi. I prefer Kawhi at 9-5. I think everybody will, which is why I think LeBron is interesting for tournaments. To be honest, the cash game guy, I would go with LeBron. If I was playing a cash game, I'd go with LeBron just because he's been way more consistently hitting closer to his ceiling than Kawhi has. In tournaments, I love Kawhi. To be honest, I just like Kawhi in general. I like him as a player. I like him as a person. 9,500 against Cleveland. I've loved targeting small forwards against Cleveland. LeBron has not played much defense during the season, and he's significantly cheaper. So I think a lot of people are going to go with Kawhi, which makes me kind of lean towards LeBron somewhat. But we'll see how I feel tomorrow. But as of right now, I love Kawhi. I love LeBron. I get merit for both of them. Now, Kawhi is a great defender, but LeBron James is LeBron James. If you think Kawhi is going to shut LeBron down somewhat, then it makes sense to play Kevin Love or Kyrie even, especially Kyrie instead. But I like Kawhi and LeBron both. By far, they're the best two options at the small forward position. Hayward's okay at 77 if he plays. I don't know if he's going to play. He's got sore quads. That could scare some people away. But 77 is reasonable for him, I think, especially without favors. Carmelo, 6,500. The price is tempting. We just don't know what he's going to do. First of all, we don't know if he's playing. Second of all, even if he does play, we don't know how many minutes he's going to play. We know they're going to limit his minutes going forward and play some of their young guys. So we don't know. I would stay away from Melo for sure. Harrison Barnes, certainly interesting. If he plays the 4, I like him better. If he plays the 3, he's probably going to see Roberson. So if he sees Roberson, that's tough. It's two defensive guys that might go at it. But Barnes flashed some upside against Toronto. We know he plays a lot of minutes. In his last couple games, he's taken a lot of shots, 17 and 18. So Barnes, you have to consider him. You definitely have to consider him. Let me see. Tobias Harris, great spot for him at 6K. His minutes have been okay with the exception of the Orlando game, but that was a blowout. But other than that, his minutes have been okay. He has ceiling. I wouldn't trust him in cash because we don't necessarily know. But the Knicks are not a good defensive team, so we certainly in play. Marcus Morris is a guy that has shown us some upside from time to time, but he hasn't recently. So he's kind of off my radar. But at 5,100, I get it. If you want to go cheap at small forward, I kind of get it. Terrence Ross revenge game, maybe? We'll get to the other guy in revenge. But I think Terrence Ross is in an interesting spot. I am a little concerned because DeMarre Carroll, he's questionable. But if he don't play, they got P.J. Tucker. So they do have two guys that are pretty good defensively at the small forward position. Although I think a lot of times we've seen kind of Fournier take over that role in Ross. So I think Ross is tournament only for Ross. He's always only a tournament play. And especially at 5K, his price increased. I typically like him better in the 4s. But if you want to conclude some revenge narrative, maybe he feels like the team didn't want him anymore and he's upset, I get it. You can certainly give him a shot. PJ Tucker at 44. I'll only play PJ if we find out that Carroll is out just because of the usage. But he's been pretty consistent. If you look at his game logs, ever since the 17th of March, all of his games have been above 20 DraftKings points, and his minutes have been pretty up there. So I do like PJ Tucker, but especially like him if we find out that Carroll is out. Kuzminskis, if Lance Thomas and Carmelo are out, that's the only way I'll play this guy. But if they're both out, I will continue to look towards Kuzminskis. His price is up. He was 3,500 last time he played. Now he's 42. But I think it's still, if he's going to get over 30 minutes, I think it's still a great value. They actually, this guy will take shots. He could shoot. They'll let him shoot. And he rebounds. He hustles a little bit. So only if Melo and Lance Thomas are both out will I go there. But I can certainly see the merit in it. But yeah, we talked about Joe Johnson. We talked about Joe Ingles. We talked about some of these guys. Etuan Moore, Justin Holiday's a guy you can look at for punt options, but his minutes have been suspect too, so I'm not dying to go there. And with San Antonio, pay attention to see, if Danny Green, I think he was out for rest, so I'm assuming he's going to be back, but you never know with San Antonio. They do some weird stuff all the time. Moving on to power forward, you got Anthony Davis at 10-2 against Utah. He's going to have a tough time with Gobert. The only thing about Anthony Davis is he can shoot outside. So if he pulls Gobert away from the rim, Gobert may get a little uncomfortable out there. Now, technically, Anthony Davis is a 4. So technically, you wouldn't necessarily see Gobert even cover him, but they might have to just because I don't think they have. With Favors out, there's really nobody else to match up with Anthony Davis. So they may have to stick him on there. But Anthony Davis, listen, I know it's the back end of a back-to-back. He's a big man. I don't mind playing on the back end of a back-to-back. Plus, he didn't play at all in the fourth quarter. His team completely ran away with the game against Denver. So I think he's certainly fine at 10-2. And if Boogie is out, which we don't know for sure, but if Boogie is out, we know what that guy's usage looks like. So even in a matchup against Utah, I would still think he's in play. Porzingis against Detroit, I don't like the price, but I do like him overall. He had a kind of a dud against San Antonio, but Detroit has been rough against stretch fours all season. And if Porzingis can hit his shot, which we don't always know if he could, but if he's hitting his shot, then he can hit from anywhere. And in that case, he should be able to crush Detroit, but we don't know for sure. Kevin Love certainly in play at 73. His minutes have been coming up. Kevin Love has been relying on threes all season, so I'm not concerned about Aldridge's defense. It's just a matter of, is he going to hit those threes? Now, I don't think he's going to have the same rebounding upside with LMA out there. With that said, I'll talk about LMA too. I think he's okay, 7K. against Cleveland. I'm not really looking at him to drive. He's been pretty consistent in cash games. I understand completely. I would imagine it's going to be a closer game. In cash games, he's definitely the guy. I mean, I certainly see merit in playing like Kyrie, LeBron, and LMA. Or LMA, Kawhi and Kyrie, something like that. But I definitely think Aldridge is certainly in play. 7K, and he's been pretty consistent. So as long as he plays and as long as the game stays close, I definitely like his chances. I love Serge Ibaka in tournaments. Tournaments only because we know what his floor has been like, and he's priced up a little bit now. But 6,100 against Orlando, the team that traded him. Granted, I think they probably did him a favor. I think he wanted to be traded. He's got traded to a contending team. So still, anytime anybody plays against their old team, there is that extra narrative to play a little bit harder. So I love Ibaka at 6,100. I think Dirk is certainly interesting. I don't think Cantor or Adams are capable of keeping up with him, and he's got serious height over guys like Taj Gibson and whatnot. So I definitely think Dirk's in play in a pace-up spot, and he's been pretty solid. Not too big on Gordon myself. His usage just hasn't been there. If Gasol is out, we can look towards Zebo just because he's been, he's probably going to start in Gasol's place, and he's only 5K. You're getting a center for 5K that has a decent amount of usage to begin with. Scal Labarisi, I think he's certainly in play. He's been getting solid minutes. He got into a bit of foul trouble on Sunday that kind of limited his production. I think he fouled out in like the third quarter, if that. But he's 5K. Look for a bounce back game. He didn't play much. Should be nice and rested. And Memphis has kind of struggled against power forwards pretty much all season. So I definitely like him. I'm going to move on now. Lance Thomas, if Melo is out and Lance Thomas plays, I certainly wouldn't mind him. He's not exactly the safest option, but I wouldn't mind him because he would probably see a lot of minutes. But we don't know if he's going to play. We got to pay attention, right? Finally, moving on to center. Gobert is 8K against New Orleans. I like him. His price is up. He's been on a tear lately. He's been crushing, and people continue not to play him, including myself. I don't play him much, I'm going to be honest. But at 8K, certainly in play against New Orleans. They're going to need him, that's for sure. Even with Anthony Davis in there, they're going to need him. And if Hayward's out, they're going to have to rely on him for some offense more than they normally might do that. So I definitely think Gobert's in play. The rebounds might not come as easy with AD in there, and I'm a little concerned that AD, if Gobert has to cover Anthony Davis, or even Boogie for that matter, both of those guys can play kind of outside. I'm a little worried that they might lure him out a little bit, which could hurt his rebounding upside. But he's still Gobert. Phenomenal upside. And rebounding machine. I don't remember the last time he didn't get double-digit rebounds. Oh, okay, against the 15th against Detroit, and he got 9. So this guy's a rebounding machine. I certainly think he's in play at 8K. Vooch at 78 kind of burned. Well, they didn't really burn people. He got 38 DraftKings points, but the game was such a blowout, he only had to play 26 minutes. So I don't think he hit the ceiling people were hoping, but he's still red hot. Matchup in Toronto, give me it. I'll take Vooch all day. And Vooch is the reason that I don't think this game's going to be a blowout, because I think Vooch is going to have a good game. I like Vooch a lot. I'm not saying I like him any more than Gobert or Drummond, who we're going to talk about next, but I definitely like Vooch for sure. His upside has been there. He's been playing fairly consistently, hitting 50 on the regular. Drummond only played 20 minutes against Orlando. He's the one that needs a bounce-back game. He really struggled against Vooch, but it wasn't just him. His whole team struggled. He did get 14 rebounds against Orlando. Drummond's a rebounding machine. The Knicks are a terrible rebounding team. Drummond might be my favorite center against the Knicks. Just because even though the Knicks have been bad, their young guys are going to keep playing. They're trying to earn a spot for next year. So the young guys are going to play hard. So I think they can keep this game somewhat interesting. And if that's the case, Detroit's going to want to win this game. They're in the playoff. They're in the playoffs, so they're going to want to keep playing hard. Drummond only played 20 minutes against Orlando. They got embarrassed. They're going to want to bounce back. So I do like Drummond a lot at 7,600. I don't see a scenario where he doesn't get 20 rebounds here. Willie Cauley-Stein, 55, is certainly interesting against Memphis, especially without Gasol. They kind of lose that rim protection there. Randolph is not nearly as good as a rim protector as Gasol. So if he's out, I think we could look at Willie Cauley-Stein, even at 5,500, who's also power forward eligible. Nerlens Noel, 53, doesn't really do too much for me. Now, when he starts, he's shown us he can have a good game. In 33 minutes against the Clippers, he did great, but then he only played 25 minutes against Toronto and only got 14.5 DraftKings points. So he's kind of up and down, tournaments only, but it is a pace-up spot. But he's going to have a tough matchup anyway with Adams and Cantor in there. Let's see. Cantor you can consider. He comes off the bench. Always a solid GPP play. Crushed Philly in just 20 minutes, and that's the kind of guy he is. He's not going to get mega minutes, but he doesn't need it to really crush. So he's always a solid tournament play. I think I'm off Hernan Gomez. Even if Melo, the only time I play Hernan Gomez, and I played him the last time against San Antonio on the 25th, the only way I'll play Hernan Gomez is if there's injuries. If Melo's out, that means KP can't play the 5 because they're going to need him to play the 4, which means they need Hernan Gomez to play the 5. So if Melo plays, forget about Hernan Gomez. If Melo is out, I'd probably skip to Kyle O'Quinn instead, who's significantly cheaper just because I think Hernan Gomez might get bullied by Drummond. So I think the Knicks will try to put O'Quinn in, who can maybe handle the beating a little better. But I'm not big on Hernan Gomez either way. I can consider him, like I said, if Melo is out and Lance Thomas is out, I will consider him for sure. And I'll probably throw him in some tournament lineups. But I can't trust him in cash. And O'Quinn is even more interesting just because he's cheaper if the Knicks are going to go with a two-center option. Now, keep in mind, they haven't really acted on it too much, but the Knicks have mentioned that they're going to try to play Plumlee a little more. Valanciunas, 4,700 against Vooch. I love targeting centers against Orlando, and I think they're going to need him. His minutes have been inconsistent, but we've seen Valanciunas play higher minutes in situations where they need him to. So, like against New Orleans, he played 34 minutes. Against Atlanta, he played 30. And they haven't really played a team with too dominant of a center where they've needed him to play minutes. I mean, he played 24 minutes against Detroit, 24 against Miles Turner. So they will play him in that 24 to 25 range. And at a price of 4,700 against a horrible defensive center, I got to say, I think Valanciunas is a fantastic value play. And we talked about Kyle O'Quinn. Kufa should be back. So anyway, guys, that's going to do it for our position-by-position breakdown. It's a whole new week. I'm still getting over the cold a little bit. I'm feeling a lot better, but it's still kind of lingering. Again, Fuego, we appreciate you coming on the pod. Hope to have you on this week again and kind of recap your event. And guys, be ready because, like I said, we added a new member to the team. Fantastic MLB DFS baseball player. And we'll introduce him at some point. We're going to do a preview pod for baseball separately from the basketball pod. And then we're still working out the schedule for when baseball starts, whether we're going to completely stop the NBA podcast or whether we're going to keep them going. But why don't you guys tell me what you want? Do you want me to keep going with the NBA regular season, or should we just completely focus on baseball? You guys tell me. Anyway, guys, if you're not a member of WiseTake.com, please sign up. It's free membership. You get access to our free raw projections. Really what it is a community. Right? Everybody has tools. We're trying to give you a community, a place to kind of talk to some of our guys, get some advice maybe, or just shoot some ideas off each other. Just a community. Talk to each other, support each other. It's all fun and games. Make fun of each other, whatever you want to do. So we're trying to get that going. Follow us on Twitter if you're not following. The WiseTake Twitter is @wise_take, and obviously you know mine. If you're listening on YouTube, please hit that like button. We really appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel. We're growing, and we appreciate every one of you. We want to hear feedback also, so let me know. You let me know anything that you want to see on the pod. If there's somebody you want me to interview, let me know. I'll try my best. And yeah, if you're listening on Podbean, give us a follow. And if you're listening on iTunes, rate us, review us, and subscribe. Subscribe to the channel, but also rate us. Bump us up these ratings. We're trying to get out there. So if you appreciate what we do, we will appreciate what you do, which is spread the word about us. So anyway, guys, as always, good luck.